Hey guys, welcome to. Thank you for joining us. Just a few things before we get started. Algunas cosas antes de comenzar y bienvenidos. Gracias por acompañarnos. Vamos a estar teniendo una conversación aquí con Jessica. Va a ser en inglés. Si quieren ver la conversación con subtítulos en español, vayan a los ajustes ahí en Facebook o en YouTube y pueden poner los subtítulos en español. Tienen pregunta o cuestión, algún problema, mándenme un mensaje y les puedo ayudar. Right, so Jessica, thank you, Jessica, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Beautiful spring day, I guess, after a few cold days. And it's my understanding that you are taking a few days off.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Very, very.
The dog outside.
Very, I guess, how would you say, deserved days off after all you've given there at the hospital. For those of you that don't know, Jessica works at a hospital, and God has, done amazing things there in the hospital. I was just thinking about, like, I told you, Jessica, about this scripture, Matthew chapter 5, loosely paraphrased, but it says, you know what? Let me just read it. I have it here on my phone. It says, New Living Translation. I'm sorry, the New International Version is. And a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the very same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And I was just thinking, like, as I'm sharing here with Jessica, that it's that's what our church or the church should be about, and it's being a light in a place of darkness. And Jessica, I think you're being a light. Just like it says, a lamp is placed on a table. I think God has placed you on the table that He wanted to place you in to be a light. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I just wanted to, I was knowing about this meeting a few days ago, and I was really nervous about what, we would talk about. But around 4:00 in the morning, God woke me up and said that, this is what we need to be talking about, is that, I've always felt that people who lack purpose in their life, I've spoken about this in church before, when you lack purpose, your life is not as meaningful. So I think that this is our purpose, is to be a light. And when we take those opportunities to fulfill that purpose God has given us, our life is more fulfilled, and we can feel good about the things that we're doing. So there's always something in our human spirit that we feel fearful sometimes in the face of the opportunities where we can be that light and have that purpose fulfilled in our lives. So one example of this that has been running through this whole course of, working with patients who have the COVID virus and being, immersed in this environment and atmosphere that we sometimes don't feel confident in. I've been a nurse for a long time, and sorry, the dog is barking. I've been nursed a long time, and there's a certain population of patients that I am so used to working with and knowing what the right thing to do with caring for these patients are. But when we are faced with a virus that we're unsure of, it's sometimes more of a challenge, and there's fear involved with doing that. So when we first started this, some nurses were pulled from other areas in the hospital that they didn't always feel comfortable coming and working on our floor. And they all have the same theme of that they were fearful when they first came. But these were people, there's one woman I'm thinking of in particular who was really very faith-filled, and she was nervous when she first came to our floor, and she told me this on Friday before she was called back to her usual place of work. She said, Jessica, when I first walked on this floor, I was so afraid. She said, but the atmosphere of this floor, because you all work together and you all have this spirit of this is what we were meant to do, this is our purpose. She said, I imagine being anywhere else. She literally cried when she was leaving our floor because she felt that, this is what God called her to do. She said that she wasn't trained to go into the rooms and care for the COVID patients, but she would pray over each nurse. She said that Jesus would follow them into that room. And she just, felt that this is what God called her to do. And yet she said, I'm a woman of faith, but when I was walking onto your floor, I was afraid. But she said, I'm so grateful that I still stepped up. I still stepped onto the floor, and that, myself and my staff embraced her. And she felt that her purpose was carried through because she stepped onto that floor. She stepped out in faith, and she knew that God was going to put her in the right place. But if she would have sat home and listened to those fears, she would have never had this experience.
Yeah, that's so powerful what you're sharing, because I guess you could say there's a lot to be afraid right now. Talking to the legislator, one of the legislators in Suffolk County, he was just sharing with us how there's just in Brentwood, where the church building, where we gather, or where we used to gather a few weeks ago, that there's about 4,000 people confirmed that have been infected there. And yeah, it was a little, for me personally, I've been going and doing some outreach there for several weeks now. And at first it was a little nerve wracking. It was a little, that fear kind of, that human fear kind of comes over you, but it reminds you that, this is my purpose. This is my calling. Mm-hmm. And there's different purposes and different calling. You don't have to be a minister as you've been that example, you being a nurse, fulfilling a purpose, a calling that I think is God given. I think that God placed you there. That has inspired a lot of people, that has activated people's faith that maybe was dormant, or kind of reignited some of the people's faith and kind of helped them, grow their faith, in this time. And it's so interesting, right? That it's during these times that it kind of challenges our faith. So we kind of rise up a little bit in our faith, or we really get challenged. So you've seen some really powerful testimonies with some of your patients. I know there's certain things you can and cannot share, but what are some of these experiences where you've seen people really lighten up, and maybe a miracle of both healing and or maybe a miracle of their faith?
I think that the most amazing thing that this has taught me is that, we have to celebrate. We have to dance sometimes, and and like how people say, like, devil, no, not today. Like, not today. It's not going to happen today. And I think that my staff has really rallied around that, and that we show our patients this is a sad time, and it's this time where where they wish they never experienced. But, we say to each of our patients, like, the day you're discharged, we're going to dance in the hallway. And I think at first they look at us like you're crazy, like, that we're just saying that. And when we first started having patients like this, it was so sad, and we all cried every single day. But when we had our first patient that was going to be discharged, I said to the staff, we're playing a song and we're going to dance in the hallway. Whoever's available, at 1:00, this person's being picked up and we're going to dance. And we literally turned on our phones and got a speaker and we played music. And the patient was so grateful that, that this is something to celebrate, that, we're going to show that there's beauty in sad times. There's times to celebrate what God is doing each day. And from that first patient, we've done it for every patient. And the amazing thing is our floor has been on so many news channels for those celebrations. Mm-hmm. I just went on to Lightworks. It's like an Instagram page. And there was our patient with my assistant nurse manager on their Instagram page. They have 92,000 followers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my patient. Like, I took care of her. I knew her. And like it was on CBS. It's like, I think God wants to show people that we have to celebrate every day. We have to celebrate what he's doing, because this virus really is so unpredictable. And, yet there are patients who are getting off ventilators. There are patients that are getting sent home. And I don't want to say, though, there aren't times, though, to be sad, because there are patients that are not going home. And that's something, too, though, that we have to say, like, we fight so hard to send our patients back home to their families. But there are certain patients that God is calling them home. And we have to celebrate, too, that we're not meant for this world. Like, God promises a place with him. And as much as we hold on to this world, this is not always our place to stay forever. So we celebrate that too, that God has a plan for everyone.
Right.
And it's, it's just a reminder that even though times are hard right now, we should celebrate even the smallest things.
Right. Absolutely. It's very powerful that you say that, because it just reminds me what the scripture tells us about, that there is time for everything. There's time for joy and there's time for sadness. And although there is a lot of loss, I think that we've all known somebody that has, that has experienced loss, some more than others. Some of my friends have experienced extreme amounts of loss. And I think you and I can both say, within our family, within our church family, that, pretty much spared to a certain degree. Our hasn't been hit that as hard as it's been, and I think that's a blessing as well. It gives us, reminds us that this is our calling to just be that light and just be for a reason. You've been exposed tremendously. You've put your life on the line. You've put your family, I'm sure, through a ton of stress. Just because it's not easy. I mean, my wife is out there doing, social service as well with her teams, as well as me with my teams of the ministry. But he's given us strength. He's given us, hope so. Just to kind of maybe wrap up. Your time is valuable, and appreciate you spending time with me. But what's something that you would say to somebody? How can you be that light when you're not, maybe you're not in a position, you might not think that you're in a position to kind of hold through other people. I just have just a service job, or I just have this kind of job, or I just do this, or I don't. Or some people might say, oh, for the housewife, or even for the unemployed out there, how can you be a light, in the middle of these circumstances?
It's funny that you're talking about this, because my mother and I were just talking. Like we have a little meeting every night at 9:00, and we were talking about reading the Book of Acts, and just seeing like how like God sent angels all the time to the early church, and like, why doesn't that happen now? And I said to my mom, like, we don't look at the world with this supernatural eyes, and we're losing that. Many of us don't take the little signs that God is giving us to act and do something. And that, I just pray sometimes, like, open up our eyes to the little signs. I think, God's voice is still talking to us today. And when you see somebody and God just gives you that little, like, go over to them, like, you just have to open your ears to God's voice. He's telling us every day where we should be the light, but sometimes we get caught up in the business that we don't hear it. So we just have to all just take those little opportunities. When you think you're talking to yourself, sometimes I think that's God's voice saying, go and pray with that person. Just go, and just drop off that little cupcake. Have your kids draw a little rainbow for somebody. Like, if God puts if you hear that little voice telling you to do something, just do it, and don't be afraid not to. Don't think that the person's going to reject you, or that that it's not going to be accepted, because sometimes that little gesture is something that's going to pull someone out of the depression they're in, or sometimes that little smile is going to make that person not give up on hope, or have them realize that there is still goodness in the world. And I think that that's what people need most, is just to see that there's still love in this world, and God's love is still strong, and God's light still is overtaking the darkness.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Thank you. We honor you. We appreciate everything that you do, you and your staff. They are in our prayers. There's people all over the country praying for you and all of your staff. We might not know their names, except for, those that you mentioned to us, but we, just people all over the country, and not just all over the country, but in other countries, Mexico, Latin America as well that are connected to us. So we appreciate you very much.
No, we feel the prayer. We feel the prayer because sometimes people say to us, like, I don't know, your floor is like different. When I walk onto your floor, I just feel something different. And I was like, I know that that's the prayers. I know that when I see on TV my floor, I say that is the prayers that people are lifting us up so that the world can see that there's hope. The world can see that there's patients going home. The world can see that there is still, amazing things happening. And I know that's the prayer because it's not by coincidence. So thank you all. Thank you all for every single prayer that you give every time you think of us.